I'd like to call this special council meeting to order. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of council are present. Mayor Redekop.
I'm going to save announcements until the council and committee meeting, and there is no addendum. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest with respect to the matters on the agenda? There being none, then Councillor Noyes, I understand you have a resolution to go into closed session.
Yes, Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Lewis that the council will now hold a closed session meeting at 5:02 p.m. to consider the following. Pursuant to Section 239 in brackets 2F of the Municipal Act 2001, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, regarding proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment 613 Helena Street. B, pursuant to Section 239 in brackets 2C of the Municipal Act 2001, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and Section 239 in brackets 2 and brackets F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, regarding 4,152 Erie Road. Pursuant to Section 239 in brackets 2 and brackets B of the Municipal Act of 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, regarding CAO performance review and organizational staffing changes.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. So we're off to closed session. Okay, we're back from closed session, and Councillor Lewis, you have the resolution for us to rise and reconvene from closed session.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Noyes that Council now rise and reconvene from closed session at 6:19 p.m. with respect to the following items. Proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment 613 Helena Street without report, and 4156 Erie Road with report
That staff proceed as
that
directed.
staff proceed as directed, and that item 5B regarding 4152 Erie Road be deferred to the June 19th, 2023 special council meeting, and CAO performance review without report, that item 5C be referred to the June 19th, 2023 special council meeting.
So just the CAO performance review.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That is carried. Councillor Flagg, you have the next resolution.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Lewis, a bylaw number 98, 2023, to confirm the actions of council at its special council meeting held on June 12, 2023, is given first and second reading.
Those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Christensen, you have third and final reading for the confirmatory bylaw. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Flagg that council adjourns at 6:21 p.m. to reconvene into a regular meeting of council on June 26, 2023.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried, which then is going to take us to our council and committee meeting, which I am calling to order. Before we proceed further, I want to begin the meeting by acknowledging that the land upon which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Adirondack, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe people, including the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are the beneficiaries of ancient art agreements, such as the dish with one spoon between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, who agreed to share the abundance of the land through peace, friendship, and mutual respect. Also, the two-row wampum, by which the Haudenosaunee welcomed the settlers and agreed to share the land in mutual respect, and the Treaty of Niagara, considered a fundamental document by First Nations in all future relations and treaties with the British. We recognize that we have a responsibility to be stewards of the land in cooperation and collaboration with Indigenous people, not only for one generation, but for all generations to come. We understand that we have an obligation to learn the lessons of our history, educate ourselves about the experiences of the Indigenous people, and seek opportunities to heal the wounds that will result in reconciliation with our Indigenous sisters and brothers. Many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people live and work in Fort Erie. We stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. We have the good fortune to live in a land of such abundance, diversity, and beauty. Let us be vigilant in protecting Turtle Island. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of council are present. Mayor Redekop.
Thank you. There's no addendum. I've got some very brief announcements. The first, I want to start with something pertaining to our youth in Fort Erie. June has been the traditional month of annual reviews for our cadet corps, and Councillor McDermott and I were at, I was at 3, I believe, Councillor McDermott, you were at 2 of the annual reviews for the Army Cadets, the Air Cadets, and the Navy League. All of them are doing very, very well. They've got excellent training programs. They have very dedicated officers and staff. They've all got very good sponsors. The parents have been, and family members have been very committed to ensuring that their children get to these meetings. What the lessons that the youth learn are extremely valuable in terms of the importance of cooperation, collaboration, teamwork, diligence. Many of them go on to become members of our national military. Some of them go on to other fields, including we were advised yesterday that one of the former Navy League members is now in medical school. So hopefully that'll be an opportunity for physician recruitment when we get around to that. So congratulations to all of those adults who have been working with our youth in those cadet programs. I had an opportunity last Thursday, along with others, to address the House of Commons Standing Committee on International Trade with respect to the underused housing tax. That remains a contentious issue, especially for our American property owners here. There are about 900 in Fort Erie. That's about 6% of our housing stocks. And this would have significant impacts on them. The committee was very attentive. And I know that there were a number of recommendations made, and this is an issue that continues to be at the forefront. Our MP, Tony Baldinelli, is to be credited for requesting and obtaining the committee hearings on this issue. June the 20th is World Refugee Day. Our local multicultural center is holding a walk, which will start at 54 Jarvis Street at 10:30 a.m. on the 20th. That walk will proceed down Jarvis Street to the Boulevard, to Bertie Street, and then to Matthew House on Central Avenue, and there will be a barbecue there. This is something that our refugees and newcomers have been participating in for a number of years. This is, I think, the 20th or 21st year, thereabouts. So I'll be attending on that day. You're all welcome. On June the 21st is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and I presume that there will be activities at the Native Friendship Center on that day as well. I have some sad news. We don't typically bring this type of news to council, but we had an award-winning nurse in Fort Erie named Roseanne Brown, who began nursing in 1974. Some of you may have known her or run into her or her family along the way. She was obviously beyond the age when she could have retired, chose not to retire, extremely vibrant individual, more or less the mother hen of the nursing staff at Douglas Memorial for the last several years, highly regarded. She received from Niagara Health a Lifetime Achievement Award for her work in the complex care unit at the hospital, and she suddenly passed away last Monday evening, and by all accounts, she seemed to be in great condition. I was able actually to provide her with a couple of tomato plants that my wife had started. We gave them to her on Sunday. So this has been a terrible time for her family, and I know that there is a special celebration of life for her on this Friday, June the 16th. The visitation is from 10 a.m. to noon. That's at the Ridgeway Legion branch. The celebration of life ceremony itself starts at 1 p.m. As I understand it, everyone is welcome. So a terrible loss, and certainly hard individual to replace. When you think about it, how many people are in a career for 50 years? How many people, especially a nurse, with the type of work that they are engaged in and the stress of the job? But she had a remarkable personality and was extremely well suited for that work. So our hearts go out to her family, and terribly sad time. I'm going to finalize my announcements by making reference to something more enjoyable, and that is Sunday is Father's Day. For all fathers, I want to wish you all a great day. I hope you have an opportunity to spend time with your family. I know fathers have children that are dispersed all over the place, but with today's technology, we should be able to link up in some fashion. So happy Father's Day to all fathers, including the members of council here who are fathers. Okay, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Then we have a public meeting, we've got some notices of upcoming public meetings. We've got a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for a property on Lavinia Street that will be held on Monday, June the 26th. 6 p.m. here in the council chambers. The information report on that application will be available Thursday, June the 22nd at 5 p.m. on our website. We also have a proposed combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for a property on Pettit Road, same evening, Monday, June the 26th, 6 p.m. here in the council chambers, and the information report will also be available on our website, 5 p.m. Thursday, June the 22nd. We do have a public meeting this evening. It relates to the town-initiated official plan amendment to permit implementation of Bill 109, the More Homes for Everyone Act of 2022. For individuals who wish to participate via Zoom, you would, presumably you're already in the waiting room and will be able to raise your hand if you wish to address council with respect to the report. We will start by hearing from staff who will provide some background information relative to the proposed amendment. Will be subject to any questions by members of council, and then I will ask if there's anyone from the public who wishes to address council on the matter. And I see that Anamika Dilwaria, the Director of Planning and Development Services, is with us this evening and will be providing us with some background information. Good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just filling in for Ms. Sissy. There was a family emergency. She couldn't make it, so I'm filling in for her. So thank you. Good evening, council, staff, and area residents. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information regarding a proposed town-initiated official plan amendment in response to the recent legislative changes that were introduced through Bill 109, the More Homes for Everyone Act 2022. Notification of June 12, 2023 public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice in the May 18, 2023 edition of Fort Erie Post newspaper. In addition, members of development community were also emailed a copy of the notice. Bill 109, the More Homes for Everyone Act 2022, received royal assent on April 14th. This bill amended 5 legislative documents, including the Planning Act. The legislation is largely based on the premise that reduced house affordability is primarily a function of an increase in population and lack of housing supply. Objectives of the legislation include reducing red tape, accelerating development application review times, and streamlining the approval process. One of the most notable change of the Planning Act as a result of Bill 109 is the mandatory refunding of the application fees associated with the application for site plan approval, combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, and zoning bylaw amendments. As of July 1st, 2023, municipalities are required to refund fees on a graduated schedule over time if the statutory deadlines for decisions are not met. The statutory deadlines are summarized in the table that is displayed on this slide. Combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendments are not subject to a refund if the decision is made within 120 days of the application deemed complete. Zoning bylaw amendment applications are not subject to a refund if the decision is made within 90 days of the application being deemed complete. Application for site plan approval are not subject to a refund if the approvals are made 60 days of the application being deemed complete. In order to provide a framework for addressing the legislative changes in the Planning Act as a result of Bill 109, Town initiated an amendment to the town's official plan in accordance with Section 26 of the Planning Act. I'll now walk you through the amendment or changes that are proposed. Bill 109 amends Section 41 of the Planning Act to require municipal authorities to delegate site plan approval authority to a designated authorized person of the municipality. Delegated authority for the approval of site plan and the execution of site plan agreement already rests with the Director of Planning and Development Services in accordance with the bylaw number 3613. As such, no changes are proposed in this regard. However, this amendment proposes to include a change in the policy of the official plan that recognizes the existing arrangement. The The amendment also proposes to exempt additional uses from site plan control, largely in effort to eliminate duplicative processes. Currently, residential, commercial development that are subject to vacant land and common element draft plan of condominiums are also subject to site plan approval. Both processes can be used to achieve the same means as it relates to the matters including, but not related to site servicing, road widening, easements, landscaping, and overall site design. Several municipalities, including some around the Niagara region, exempt residential and commercial developments that are subject to draft plan of condominium from site plan approval process. This exemption assists in simplifying and streamlining the development approval process and reduces the number of applications for site plan. As the draft plan of condominium application are not subject to statutory timelines and refunds under Bill 109, this exemption provides staff with flexibility with respect to timelines. However, it should be noted that in all cases, staff will continue to work diligently to process all applications as efficiently as possible. The goal of the planning staff has always been to streamline the planning process. The policy has also been included to guide and encourage and granting conditional site plan approval. The intent of this amendment is to expedite the site plan approval process, ensuring that the 60-day legislative timeline requirements can be achieved. Further, this will allow developers to face construction activity prior to obtaining final site plan approval and the registration of site plan agreement, provided that the details regarding building footprint, points of ingress and egress, and municipal service connections are finalized. Conditional site plan approval may be granted, allowing developer to initiate certain works such as installation of site servicing, the construction of footings and foundation. Building fees, security deposit, and conditional building permits would be required prior to any construction activity taking place. Conditional site plan approval may include the following: approval of the final plans, which includes grading plans, erosion, sediment control, landscape plan, obtaining permits, approval of studies, and payment of outstanding securities. Upon fulfillment of all applicable conditions, final site plan approval will be granted, followed by the issuance of the full building permit. Planning staff note that in circumstances where tree removal is required, conditional site plan approval will not be granted until such time a tree preservation plan is prepared by the applicant and reviewed to the satisfaction of town's senior environmental planner and appropriate permits are obtained. Lastly, to ensure the provision of certain items in site plan agreement and that development proceed in accordance with the approved plan, the proposed amendments that are required through site plan agreement. Pursuant to the Condominium Act, the application for the approval of a plan of condominium is required to follow the same planning process as a plan of subdivision. However, in accordance with the Act, the owner or the authorized agent can apply to the town council for exemption from the planning approval process. As an exemption is intended to apply for the proposal that have previously undergone a complete evaluation through a previous development approval process, that is site plan or a zoning bylaw and official plan amendment, and where no further conditions of approval are required by municipality for the development to proceed. To accompany the proposed amendment that exempt residential and commercial development that are subject to draft plan of condominium approval from site plan process, planning staff are proposing an amendment that enables condominium exemption for residential and commercial development in instances where previous evaluation has been completed and no further conditions are required. The purpose of this amendment is to simplify and streamline the development process by eliminating duplicative processes. Ontario regulation outlines the manner in which the notice of public meeting shall be provided. Municipalities have an option of providing notice through local newspaper or alternatively by posting a notice on a subject property and providing it by way of personal mail service. In accordance with the current policy of the official plan, planning staff provide a notice of the public meeting for a site-specific amendment by personal mail, placing a notice in the local newspaper, and by posting a notice on the town's website. The 2023 cost of placing a 3/4 page notice in the newspaper is $595 plus tax, which amounts to $672.35 in total, whereas the posting a notice on the subject property would cost less than $10 per sign. In considering this, planning staff have proposed amendment to the official plan that would no longer require a notice of public meeting for site-specific amendments to be provided by newspaper. Instead, staff recommended the provision of notice by way of posting a notice on the subject property, personal mail, posting a notice on the town's website. Staff are of the opinion that the proposed amendment meet the intent of the Planning Act and improves the recovery of cost associated with the development application. Further, as not all Town of Fort Erie residents read the Fort Erie newspaper, staff are of the opinion that posting a sign on the property will reach more residents and passerbys. Given the timelines requirement under Bill 109, many municipalities are shifting towards more frequent use and application of holding provisions as permitted under Section 36 of the Planning Act. Council have an ability to apply holding provision to the amending bylaw for the purpose of delaying, limiting, or preventing the use of land until such time certain conditions are met. Conditions may include, but are not limited to, construction of municipal services and infrastructure, submission of technical studies, completion of site remediation, and execution of legal agreements. Holding provisions shall be recommended when town staff and council are satisfied that the proposed development represents good planning and will meet the principle of applicable policies upon the fulfillment of conditions. When making recommendation and decision with respect to development application, town staff and council must be satisfied that the application is consistent with provincial, regional, and town policies, constitute good planning, and mitigates and addresses impact associated with development. This is generally demonstrated through submission of plans, studies, reports with development application. It is essential that these materials are prepared in accordance with the Planning Act and any guidelines or terms of references. The pre-consultation process provides the applicant with an opportunity to review their development proposal with town staff and other key agencies and identify any issues. Following the pre-consultation process, the applicants are provided with a pre-consultation agreement that contained all the comments provided by staff and agencies, fee requirement, a checklist noting studies, plans, or reports that are to be provided with a complete application. To strengthen the pre-consultation process, planning staff are recommending the following: the resubmission of a pre-consultation application in instances where substantial changes to the proposals are made. This will be at the discretion of the Director of Planning and Development Services or their designate. 1 year expiry date for the pre-consultation agreement. Currently, an applicant is required to pay pre-consultation fee, which is then credited to the formal application fee. However, as the pre-consultation will be more rigorous and will require more review time by town staff recommend that the pre-consultation fee no longer be credited to the applicant. As such, to streamline the review of formal development applications, staff have recommended the inclusion of policies that outline the process and expectations. The review for completeness will occur within 30-day time frames that are required under the Planning Act. Upon the receipt of the formal application, staff will circulate the application to internal staff and external agencies shortly thereafter. Circulating the application sooner in the process will allow internal and external agencies to identify any inadequacies and deem the application incomplete on that basis. For example, in the event the environmental impact study was not completed to the satisfaction of town, region, or Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, town staff have an ability to deem the application incomplete. Lastly, the town's official plan contains a list of studies that may be required as part of the complete application. Town staff have reviewed the existing list and recommend inclusion of additional studies such as species at risk study, qualitative and quantitative wind study, photometric analysis, land use compatibility study, parking demand study, functional servicing report, sightline analysis, and constructional impact mitigation study. Planning staff have also recommended inclusion of policy that allow Director of Planning and Development Services or their designate to refuse studies, reports, information, and material that are submitted as part of the complete application if the quality is deemed unsatisfactory or it is not completed in accordance with the applicable terms of reference or guidelines. Further, the director or their designate will have the ability to determine if the peer review of any of the required study requires to be completed. The public information open house for this application was held on April 27, 2023. Notice of the open house was provided by placing a notice in the local newspaper. Further, the members of development community were also emailed a copy of the notice. The open house was attended by town staff, 2 members of Fort Erie residents, 3 members of development community. No written comments have been received. The following matters were raised by the members of development community at the open house: pre-consultation agreement expiry and the proposed decoupling of the development application. With respect to the pre-consultation expiry, members of the development community expressed concerns with respect to the proposed 1-year expiry time frame for pre-consultation agreement, noting that this is restrictive in instances where study requirements such as a 4-season environmental study may be required. Planning staff recognize that in some cases it may take longer than an year to prepare submission requirement for a complete application. As such, upon updating the pre-consultation bylaw, staff will include a provision that will allow an extension for extension at the discretion of the Director of Planning and Buildings and Development Services. With respect to the decoupling of the development application, planning staff at one time were considering the inclusion of the policy that would no longer permit concurrent application of draft plan of subdivision, condominium application with zoning bylaw amendment. The initial intent of including this policy was to promote efficient processing of development application that are subject to legislative timeframes under the Planning Act. However, members of the development community expressed concerns and the reluctancy with respect to this approach. Based on the feedback provided by the members of the development community and further consideration of policy implication, planning staff eliminated the proposed policy for amendments. Staff recognize the importance and the value of reviewing development application comprehensively. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dilwar. Do any members of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Anamika, for your presentation. In regards to the sign that it's going up, in regards to the notification, who posted? Is it up to the resident to post it, or is the town put it up?
Your worship, to the councillor, we would be preparing the sign. Staff would prepare the sign. We would be providing that sign to the owner of the property or his agent, and it will be his responsibility, her responsibility to post that on the sign. It's a similar process that we follow for committee of adjustment, and we'll follow the same process for zoning amendment applications as well.
Thank you for that. Does anybody check to make sure that the owner has actually posted it?
Through your worship, yes, we would ask them to provide a picture that the sign has been posted, and in some instances we find that they post the sign but they are not removed after the application has been completed, and sometimes we find the signs remain on the property. So moving forward, we'll make sure that once the application has been completed, they would remove the sign and send the picture to us.
One further question about the notification also. In the mailing, and I know we have 120 meters, there's a regulation, do we have any idea if there's snowbirds or something like that live in the air but are gone for 3 months? Do we have a secondary address or any assurances that they're going to be notified?
Through your worship, yes, we would still mail out the notices in addition to posting the sign on the property. The notices will be mailed out, and it will be mailed out to whoever owns the property, and they would. Yes, in some instances they may miss it because if they are in Florida and that's not their mailing address, they may miss the opportunity. They can speak with the resident, like usually the neighbors, but yes, you are correct, that is an opportunity. We can look into that, how we can notify the residents in those situations.
One further question. In regards to the accessibility, I see that it's not going to affect the AODA standards in any way. I know that the accessibility committee does look at the plans, so the site plans for condominiums and other things, and we only meet once a month. Will that just kind of fit in with it, or would that cause any delay, or?
Your Worship, no, I don't think so that would cause any delay, because whenever we receive an application, right now we are providing those application to the chief building official who attends the meeting. That process will continue the way it is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? So just to follow up on the notification, currently we post in the newspaper, as you've pointed out, and there seems to be some concern about whether that's an effective means of notification. That is one of the methods provided for in the Planning Act, though, is it not?
Your Worship, no, the Planning Act says that you have the option to either mail the notices, put it in the newspaper, like it outlines few methods. Newspaper is one of them, but if you are following any two of those processes, you are still in compliance with the Planning Act. So it doesn't say it has to be done through the newspaper.
So this does result in not as broad notification. I mean, sticking up a sign on the property, that's not the same as putting it in a publication or putting it on the website or on social media. Have we considered, do we post these on social media?
Yes, so yes, Your Worship. So what we would do, we would mail it out to the area residents within 120 meters. We'll put it on our website, and we would put a sign on the property. And this is only for a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment on official. If it's an amendment which includes the whole town, we would still post it in the newspaper.
Okay, so social media, you didn't mention social media, so we don't put it on social media?
We put it on town's website, but social media,
I'm going to suggest that you should consider doing that,
sure, we could definitely look into that.
because I feel a lot more comfortable knowing. And to some extent, I get town-wide, this is a town-wide, town-initiated official plan amendment, but some may argue that all applications that have an impact on the planning processes in our community, which may change the official plan designation or zoning, has an impact and may have an impact on other applications within the town. So I think it's important to get as broad notification as possible. With respect to conditional site plan approval, I believe that the report suggests that is an acceptable methodology to deal with the timelines that the province has mandated within Bill 109. So at least it provides some level of approval?
That's correct. So there are other municipalities in the region, and I believe it was City of Hamilton and as well, who were looking into the option if this providing conditional site plan approval, would it comply with the legislative requirements of the Planning Act, or if it will be contrary. I mean, they took the legal opinion, and the legal opinion came back, if the municipality is providing conditional site plan approval, this would be in compliance with Bill 109, and we would not be challenged on that. This is the only way that we would be able to meet those 60-day timelines. Otherwise, it's a very, very ambitious timelines.
I know that another mechanism that would be utilized to provide additional time to town staff would be determining that an application has to be complete before the clock starts to run. Do you envisage any concerns that an applicant for whatever type of approval might consider the town is not being fair in its assessment of whether the application is complete or not? And would that open an opportunity for the individual to appeal something to the Ontario Land Tribunal?
Your Worship, so I think the key is communication here. When we would have the pre-consultation, we would outline everything in greater details, and that's why we as staff is recommending that it should be an independent fee, not credited toward the main application. So we would outline everything very clearly in the pre-consultation agreement, and till the time we deem the application complete, they cannot challenge that at OLT. Only once the application has been deemed complete, they can challenge it at the board. But I understand that sometimes there will be some difference of opinion. That's why we want to strengthen our policies, which is clearly outlined in the official plan that would be a discretion of the director, and we would have that channel of communication open, so there is no miscommunication. So, and that's the reason pre-consultation would be the key here.
So speaking of the pre-consultation, we've had some dialogue over the last few weeks about making sure that developers or those who are applying for planning approvals are aware of what staff's position is, reflective of what council's position may be on any particular proposal. And we've talked about quick to know. So you've got, as a hypothetical, you have a pre-consultation arranged. A developer comes in with a proposal. Your hair starts to catch fire because you know that you're not supportive and planning staff won't be supportive, and you don't believe council is going to be supportive. How do you deal then with the pre-consultation? What is the process? And how do we ensure that that applicant is fully aware of what the town's position is if they want to persist in proceeding?
So, Your Worship, so when we receive an application, we evaluate that proposal based on the planning principles, based on the regional, provincial, and town's policy. We are in the process of updating our official plan, which would outline the town's policies very clearly. And when we receive a pre-consultation, if it's in compliance with those policies, the vision of council would be reflected in that official plan. We would communicate very clearly to the applicant that this is not the vision of the council. So encourage them to go with what the vision of council is, what the policy is outlined, direct them in the right direction. But having said that, the applicant can still go against the staff advice, can still submit an application. Based on the Act, we are obligated to process every application. We would have to do that. So we would have to process an application. We'll try our best to steer them in the right direction, but it would have to be based on planning reasons.
And with the pre-consultation report, aside from clearly stating staff's position regarding the application, outline the reports that would be necessary, the studies that would be necessary for them to proceed?
That's correct. It would state, even though we would say this is not supported, but if they submit an application, we want to have all the tools in our toolbox to say why we are not supporting it, like a planning justification report, compatibility study, and that, let's say it's an incompatible situation, we can say land use compatibility, that would come back and say, yes, this study does not support what the applicant is proposing, so we would be able to, that will give us some additional tools and ammunition to deny that application.
So the applicant then would proceed knowing what the town staff's position is, and if they incur costs,
it would be,
they've been warned.
Yeah, they would be warned, yes. And also we would have the opportunity to get a report peer reviewed. Usually we get a report which is usually favorable to the developer, like a traffic report or an EIS. So with this changes in the policy, we have the ability to ask them for a peer review, any report, and so that way at least we can get an independent opinion.
Right. And with respect to the 1 year validity of a pre-consultation, why is it 1 year? Why not 18 months or 2 years?
Your Worship, we thought 1 year would be more easy to follow, and usually it's 1 year, the time frames, the policies do not change, which is, I stand corrected, the way legislation is changing right now, it's every 6 months we get a new legislation. But that's what we thought, 1 year is a more reasonable time frame, and we can implement that more easily.
So if you, if it is 1 year, if council approves that, and you've indicated that the director would be, the policy would provide that the director has the discretion to extend that in certain circumstances, you'll be preparing, I presume, the basis for how that discretion could be utilized?
That's right. We would outline the policies, like it could be, there was, like, just to give an example, the COVID hit, and then there was some situation, there was some personal hardship that the person had to go through. Like, we would evaluate based on our merits of that situation, and then we would say whether we can give them a year extension or not. And that, I think, would be most applicable in situation of an EIS, where they need a fourth season or something else has come up which was outside their control.
Okay, and you've also made reference to a tree preservation plan, that could hold up a site plan application?
That's correct, yes. So because we understand that council and staff are very, very concerned about the tree removal that's happening, so we want to nip it in the bud, and we want to make it very clear that the conditional site plan approval will not be provided if there are trees on the property without going through a tree preservation plan. And in some situation, if need be, we would ask for undertaking like financial letter of credit or something that would give more teeth to us, more power to us for staff, so we would ensure that it will act as a deterrent. They would not be going ahead and removing the trees from the property.
The mechanics of that then would be the pre-consultation, tree preservation plan identified. If the plan hasn't been completed, the application isn't complete.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of council? If not, then thank you very much, Ms. Dilawari, but I wouldn't go too far because we're going to put this report on the floor. Could I have a mover? Councillor Lewis. So that report's on the floor for any questions or comments. Okay, so I have some other questions, which I was waiting for the report. The region does make, in the region's comments, they made reference to how they would like their official plan referred to. I noticed in the draft policy, all of those areas haven't been changed yet. That will happen before this comes back to us in a bylaw form?
Yes, yes, Your Worship, we will make those changes.
Okay. And there was a reference as well in the report to the community benefits study. What is the status of that?
Your Worship, I believe it's almost close to conclusion. We are going to have a public meeting. Mr. Hurlovich is working on that report. There is a notice that would be posted in the newspaper about the public meeting. I believe it's tentatively scheduled for July.
Okay. There's also on page 9 a reference to tree preservation plan and a reference to the regional tree and forest conservation bylaw. Once the town's bylaw has been revamped, will it be added to this policy?
Yes, Your Worship, we would do that, yes.
Just give me a second here. Okay. So page 15 of the report, which I guess is the policy, deals with neighborhood plans. And if there's a neighborhood plan, I understand staff's position with respect to neighborhood plans, but if there is a neighborhood plan, and it needs to be modified because the proposal is not in conformity with that plan. So according to item, I think it's 13 point whatever, 1.3, says that if the proposal is not in conformity with the neighborhood plan has to be modified. That would be identified at the pre-consultation stage.
Yes, Your Worship. So moving forward, we are identifying if there is a neighborhood plan that changes would need to be made. There was some situation in past that we did not follow that, but staff had different planning reasons to support that. But moving forward, we'll make an effort that the neighborhood plan is looked into and it's identified at the pre-con if changes needs to be made.
Okay, and then on page 17 of the report dealing with subdivision and condominium control, there's a provision that's been deleted. So the council will only recommend approval of those plans of subdivision which conform with the following criteria. The one that's been removed states the plan of subdivision is not deemed to be premature and it is considered necessary in the public interest. So why would that have been removed?
Can I just go ahead and grab the report, Your Worship?
Yes, I'm sorry. So that's on page 18. And it's 1.5 sub 2 sub D, which has been deleted.
So it's the subdivision section.
It's on page 18 of the report. It's 1.5 subdivision and condominium control.
So I believe the intent was that we would only allow subdivision that will conform with the policy and it can be supported by the services. If they are concerned with any of the three which are included, then we would not follow that. But I can look into that and get back.
If you would, so the, since we're there, the subparagraph immediately above that is, the town is able to provide necessary services without imposing undue increases in taxation on all residents. That, so my understanding of that would be, and you can advise me if it's correct, that if there's going to be a cost to the municipality to provide the extension of a service, water, sewer, roads, if it's an undue increase that has to be picked up by all the taxpayers, the staff might not recommend approval of that plan.
So, yes, Your Worship. So the intent is the development should pay for the development. And in the situation where we have no studies that would support that it is covered through DC or any other situation that the study has been identified, then we would make it very clear at the pre-consultation stage that if you want to proceed with this development, the cost of extending the services would be entirely the developer's cost. So that would be made very clear. If that development is not been identified in our DC or any other studies, yes.
Okay, and my final question is, there is reference to the use of holding provisions for zoning, and that would assist in ensuring that no development moves forward unless a variety of conditions have been met.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of council? Then thank you very much, Ms. Dewaria.
Thank you.
A very good report, and please let Ms. Cece know that it was an extremely well-written report. Okay, so that report's on the floor. If there are no further questions or comments, then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? None opposed? That is carried. That then takes us to the consent agenda. Can I have a mover for the consent agenda? Councillor Dubanow. Any questions or comments with respect to the reports that are in the consent agenda? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. In regards to CAO 11-2023, the land matters, I'm just a comment, because I saw in the land committee meetings there was a question about Church on the Beach, them wanting to extend it. And I'm just, when I was coming into town today, into town hall, I noticed there was a big sign. I didn't stop to read the whole sign, but it basically just said Sundays. So I'm not sure whether, because there's certain Sundays that they're not going to be allowed. But the sign, again, I didn't stop to read it, but it said, Church on the Beach, Sundays. And there's an arrow pointing. So I just want to make sure that it's clear to the public that there are certain Sundays or weekends that it's not, well, Sundays that it's not going to be allowed, because I would hate for a lot of people to show up and find out and be disappointed. Again, I did not stop and read the fine print, but when I was driving past, I saw, on the beach. So.
I guess I'm relieved to know that you were actually paying attention to the road and not the sign.
Husband may disagree with you, but
Any other questions? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just touching on what Councillor Noyes had mentioned about Church on the Beach, the Land Committee minutes mentioned that staff would try and engage with the organizers to see if they could find an alternative location for them on the holidays where beach traffic is too heavy to host it there. And I'm just wondering if staff had any update on how those discussions would go, because it's a very successful event. It brings a lot of people down to Crystal Beach, and I'm just wondering if there's another way we can accommodate them on those days when they can't get on the beach.
Mr. McQueen, do you know if there's been any follow-up on that?
Through the chair, I'm not sure if we received a response from the applicant, but they were advised that one weekend, like maybe for everybody's benefit, the August 1st weekend, there is a large volume of activity down in that area, and having a large gathering on the beach, even early in the morning, really is quite difficult for us to manage with a holiday weekend and all the traffic down there. But we did send an offer out to look for alternate locations. I'm just not sure if they've followed back to look to see if any of those alternate locations might work for them.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. McQueen, report PDS 44 2023, the terms of reference update for Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Could we not include a provision that would permit participation digitally?
Through the chair, I've had some preliminary discussion with the deputy clerk on that matter, and I think we were looking to have a more comprehensive discussion on how that might relate to a number of the committees. That there has been similar requests for virtual meetings, and I believe it may require a change in the procedural bylaw to allow the meetings to happen virtually, and we certainly would be supportive of moving forward to the extent that we can to allow that for greater access to residents and greater access to the ability to participate for particularly some residents that may have difficulty with transportation or getting here, or for some other reason wanting to participate and needing to do that virtually. So we are definitely supportive of that, and that'll be a takeaway for Ms. Carter and I to come back with a solution to see if that can in fact happen for a number of the committees that were brought forward.
Yes, I'd appreciate that, because I know that there are a number of municipalities that do permit that, and I can't imagine why we would be any different. Are there any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the items in the consent agenda? No one opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to Planning and Development Services, I believe. Yes, Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you very much. Planning and Development Services is in session for the evening. We have no presentations or delegations this evening. However, we do have two reports that are being brought back. The first one is PDS 39-2023. That is a proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment for 613 Helena Street. That had been previously, I thought,
Deferred.
yeah, that had been, did we, was it not put on the floor? Did we not have a mover for it when we deferred it?
It says that it was postponed from May 29th.
Okay, so
Been previously moved. It's
Okay.
on the floor.
Sorry,
You moved it.
yeah, you know what? That just goes to show how much, there's only so much running the hamster can do on the wheel, as I like to say. So that's already on the floor. That was previously moved by me. Thank you, Your Worship. Are there any questions or comments from members of council regarding the report? Your Worship.
Yeah, I just had a few questions with respect to this, and the first question had to do with whether or not this is a situation where a holding provision would be put in place pending the construction of the infrastructure necessary to service this proposed plan.
Ms. Delaria? Your Worship?
I don't know, that's what I'm asking. Is this an appropriate?
Yeah, is this a situation where we would utilize a holding provision?
I don't, through Mr. Chair, I don't think so, because a holding provision would say if it was a different situation, you could have said. It could be for the servicing, etc., like construction of the services or completion of an environmental study. In this situation, they have done that. The construction of services, staff has identified it would be the front ending that would happen unless council decides otherwise, but I don't think holding provision would be the right way to go for this application.
Your worship?
So one of the conditions of, just so that I'm clear, one of the conditions of approval would be the extension of the sanitary sewers and the storm sewers and the water main. So until that condition has been met, there's no subdivision agreement. Is that what you're saying, Ms. Dewaria?
Mr. Warrior?
Mr. Chair, all I'm saying is that if we have that condition, they would not be able to get the building permit till the time the servicing has happened. Staff has identified that the servicing has to happen I think it's condition number 16 in our report that says that applicant would have to front end the condition, they would have to service the lands, and then once they have serviced the land, they would be able to get the building permit, but they would not be able to get the building permit till the servicing has happened. So in my opinion, we would be covering that the servicing issue would be resolved. They would not be able to proceed with the development unless the land has been serviced.
Your worship?
Yeah, the page 11 of the report makes reference to a fenced storm water management pond, but condition 13 speaks of it being a functional amenity space. Will it be a functional amenity space or a fenced pond?
Mr. Warrior?
Mr. Chair, through you, the stormwater management pond will not be fenced. It would be a recreational space and it would be accessed by all the residents of that community.
Okay. I read with great curiosity the response from the District School Board of Niagara that made no reference to there being any capacity issues with respect to the schools in the vicinity. I guess if you didn't live in Fort Erie and you weren't employed by the school board, you could maybe believe that. We all know that the high school is way over capacity. We know that Garrison Road is over capacity. We know that Peace Bridge Public School is going to have a new addition and it will be at capacity. So, and we've also heard from the Catholic School Board on a couple of recent applications that they want to be made aware of what's happening because St. Philomena is, I think, at or over capacity as well. So that is, that's a concern because we know that these are two-story units, condo units are being constructed, and those are, I would think, for families. And that means there's going to be children, and that means there's going to be a need for space in the schools. The fact that there's going to be children there is also a concern to me. I know that our planning documents, unfortunately, include this property in our urban boundary. It is designated for residential use. It's, I'm going to say nothing more than that it's troubling to me that there will be children utilizing Helena Street one way or the other. Teenagers, maybe, younger children, a little challenging. That road is not particularly wide. There's a limited shoulder, and children are not, I don't think, going to remain confined to that area, even though there is there will be a park, and I presume we're going to end up having to pay for the playground, which is unfortunate. So I've got a whole bunch of misgivings about this proposed subdivision. I think we're at a stage where it's running up against the Ontario Land Tribunal if we were to deny this. But I had put forward a motion before that condition 16 remove the words to front end and make the responsibility of putting in these water mains, sanitary sewers, and storm sewers, the responsibility of the developer. So I'd like to put that motion back on the floor. It's committee, so I don't need a seconder. So I know that we've had some dialogue with staff about this. I know that they've got some concerns, but it seems to me that this is infrastructure that's going to cost $500,000 or more. It is going to provide a benefit to one party alone, and that is the owner of this property who has proceeded with the development proposal. I know that he has cooperated with staff and council. I know that the developers have the right to move this forward, and but I'm wanting to do what we can to make sure that as the new policy with respect to Bill 109 stated, or at least our official plan stated, that we wouldn't be committing the residents of Fort Erie to an undue cost in order to provide infrastructure for someone else. So that's my motion, to remove the words in condition 16 to front end and replace with for, the word for, F-O-R.
Thank you, Your Worship. So your amendment is now on the floor. Do any other members of council have any questions or comments regarding the amendment? So I'm seeing none. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? So the amendment carries. So the report is, as amended, is still on the floor. Your Worship, did you have anything else?
No, I'm fine for now, thank you.
Okay. Actually, before I go on to anyone else, I'm just wondering, just from the perspective that you had raised about the pedestrian access on Helena Street, with that being a regional road, would there be any opportunity to perhaps have some dialogue with the region on perhaps a multi-use facility that carries down to the Friendship Trail or something along those lines? I recall we had environmental constraints, but I'm just wondering, perhaps that's maybe a better conversation for the region to take up.
It is, and the region is also undergoing, or will be undergoing in the not-too-distant future, a review of their development charges bylaw. So that study could very well include something of that nature, which may be of a timely nature.
Oh, very good, because I think that's definitely something that needs to be looked onto for that road, regardless if we had this development come forward. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Just on that thought, again, I know over the years I've mentioned that the ditches on Helena Street are deep enough that you could put a canoe in and go up and down, and they're sometimes deeper than some of our stormwater management ponds. And it does have me, I do have a lot of concerns regarding the possibility of a lot of children and young families or anybody walking up and down. I think the shoulders are almost non-existent on that road. And I'm not an engineer, but we do have ditches. Is there not a way that we could basically put culverts in the ditches and cover the ditch and make a walkway where the ditches currently are? Like, in other words, there'd be something underneath the sidewalk or whatever, and that there would be, I know there's conservation lands and environmental sensitivity, but if there's a ditch there, if there's some creative way, we can still kind of take care of the drainage, but perhaps have a closed ditch and have a walkway on that. Like I said, I'm just throwing that out there, not knowing what the pros and cons are. I'm sure there's a lot, but that would at least give the individuals or people walking a place to walk, not on the road. And just a thought.
No, and Councillor Noyes, it's actually a really good thought, and I did actually raise that with staff, that exact alternative earlier on. I'm just wondering, Ms. Del Warria, could you perhaps highlight, I think there was environmental issues that just didn't make that a practical option at this point. I'm wondering if there's anything you can expand on that.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we had that, this was brought up at the last previous council meeting, and we had a meeting with the regional staff. Because there are environmental features, they would require in Class EA to extend any sidewalks or any structures across those environmental features. So that was a big project. EA would be required, so it was basically left at that point, but the applicant has agreed to provide sidewalk along the frontage of their property. So we thought it was a good compromise, but yes, extending the sidewalk all to the south to Albany was not an option, was not a feasible option.
Thank you. Councillor Noyes?
I appreciate that, but again, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a planner. I don't know how a ditch itself could be an environmental feature. Like, I mean, I'm saying you're not using any more of the land. Basically, you put culverts in, you cover the ditch, so it's a closed ditch, and on top of that, you put a sidewalk. To me, it seems a simple solution, but I don't know how a ditch can be an environmental feature, and those ditches have got to be 8 feet. Like, I mean, they're wide.
I fell in one of those ditches while I was canvassing during the election.
Yeah,
They're very deep.
Those ditches are wide, and again, I'm not talking about using environmentally sensitive lands that, you know, we're not moving anything, we're just basically covering the ditch. But I don't know.
No, I appreciate those comments. I think it's the environmental I think it's the environmental assessment. Your worship, did you have,
Just on that point, I mean, we're talking, it looks like 800 to 900 feet, and I don't know what the cost per meter for a culvert is, but, that would be something that we'd also borne by the taxpayers, and we would simply be exacerbating what I already consider to be an undue burden on people who aren't going to be living in this subdivision. So I think it does come under the concerns about safety. The question is, what would that cost be? And maybe we could find that out.
yeah, actually, perhaps, Your Worship, if staff might, I don't know if Mr. Stojanovic has a rough idea off the top of his head. I know Mr. Walsh sometimes can do some quick math, but that might be something to look into, not just for our own purposes, for identifying it in a bylaw later, or a DC bylaw later on, but I think the region should be, with it being a regional road, I think it would be appropriate for them to look at. Mr. Stojanovic, do you have any thought, any rough idea on what we'd be looking at cost-wise to do that much of a culvert and a sidewalk?
So the estimated length about 900 feet?
Was it 900 feet or 900 meters, Your Worship?
Looks like 900 feet.
Okay.
So around 300 meters. So, I mean, in terms of overall conceptually, I think from what Councillor Noyes has mentioned, in terms of burying the ditch, certainly through the detailed design, they could be looking at some possibilities of incorporating the storm sewer as part of, in the ditch, and then building the sidewalk over top of that storm sewer. That's something that could potentially be looked at. In terms of the storm sewer cost, you're looking at somewhere around $1,500 a meter, ballpark. So if it's about 300 meters, give or take, you're looking at, 450 to 500,000 just for the pipe itself, and then the sidewalk. I don't have a current figure there, but you'd probably, be in and around, a couple 100,000 there for the sidewalk, give or take. So all in, somewhere between, 5 to 7 as a ballpark.
Thank you. And I mean, figuring we might get an environmental and EIS and everything involved, we could be talking 7 figures at this point if I'm hearing correctly. Yeah, I see you nodding there. So I think that's it. Councillor Noyes, was there anything else? Okay. Any other members of council? Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Chair. Just a note, on page 8, we talk about sidewalks and the fact that the internal sidewalks should be on the park side. And then further down, it says that town staff, or that the owner agrees to a minimum to construct the sidewalks on one side of the internal streets. They seem to conflict, and I'm just wondering which one would hold precedent over the two.
Ms. Deloria, do you have a comment on that?
Mr. Chair, we would look into if there is any conflict, if we can fix it, but we know it would be on one side of the street within the subdivision that the sidewalk would be constructed. We'll ensure that it's not conflicting.
So am I hearing that it would be on the park side? Is that what I'm hearing?
It would be on the park side. Can you please mention, where was it mentioned in the report?
Yeah, Councillor Flagg.
So right at the top of page 8, you will see a staff response.
Okay. I would say it would be on the park side.
So the staff response is that it would be on the park side, but then further in the appendix in the agreement, it said that it would be on one side in section 12 of the appendix.
We would fix the condition just to make sure it's consistent. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Flagg. Any other members of council have any questions or comments? So I'll call the question then on the report as amended with His Worship's amendment. All those in favor? So that carries. Thank you. So now we'll move on then to PDS 39, 2023, which is the original report before the supplemental. I'm just wondering for clarification, Your Worship, do we pass this as well, or would we defeat it?
No, I think we simply defeat this because this was replaced by PDS 1. And I see
Okay.
the clerk shaking her head, yes.
Very, very good. I wasn't sure either, so I appreciate that. And this had been previously moved, so this is already on the floor. Before we do that, any questions, comments, just from a... All right, I'm not seeing anything. So I'll call the question then. All those in favor? In favor?
Oh, sorry.
All right, so
Yeah.
all those in favor? All those opposed? So the report's defeated.
Let that be a lesson. Let that be a lesson. Don't follow me.
So we're finished with reports for the evening. So I'm just wondering, any members of council have any new business or inquiries they'd like to raise under planning this evening? So I'm seeing none. Any questions about the business status report? And in that case, Your Worship, Planning and Development Services is closed for the evening, and I hand the chair back to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dubanow. That takes us to Infrastructure Services, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Report number IS 14-2023. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Municipal parking lot use and maintenance policy. Any comments or questions? Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things on the Schedule A on the ownership here. I noticed that Fire Station 4 Old is still on the list, and I checked today, and I don't believe that we any longer own that. So I think that's probably something we can remove. And I checked today, and I don't believe there's a mausoleum cemetery.
Just a question. We're on the report for municipal parking lot use and maintenance policy. Is that there? Okay.
Yep. So there's a parking lot there that says
Okay, that's, okay.
that we were responsible for Fire Station 4 Old. It's the very last page of the report.
Okay, I'm going to give that to Mrs. Stefanovic.
Thank you. So, yeah, that is an old reference there, so that note will be removed regarding the old fire station.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flagg, does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mayor Redekop?
Yes. So in terms of the processes here, in terms of how frequently some of these lots will be inspected, I presume that the garbage collection in these parking lots is done by town forces with that little blue truck?
Mr. Stefanovic?
That is correct.
So why couldn't they just take a look at the parking lot periodically? Some of them aren't very large lots. Why could they not be taking a look? Or are we talking about the fact that they will be looking, but there'll be a formal sachet out to the parking lot each month by someone dedicated to do that, to advise if there's any needs for repairs? Is that the situation?
That is correct, yes.
Any further questions?
Yes, and then of all these definitions, traffic, which is on page 12 of the report, bottom of that page, includes pedestrians, ridden, led, or herded animals, vehicles, motorized snow vehicles, and other conveyances. So vehicles, I presume, are motorized, or are there vehicles that aren't motorized that are traffic?
Mr. Stefanovic?
So the question was are some vehicles motorized or not?
So why would we delineate motorized snow vehicles and not just say motorized vehicles?
Mr. Stefanovic?
I can't specifically respond to that specific question other than provide a generic response to Mayor Redekop, is that we're looking to do an all-encompassing definition here. There's certainly, again, in terms of motorized versus non-motorized, there's instances where there's electric bikes and so on, so those wouldn't be necessarily considered motorized.
So I wonder if staff could have a look at that, so when it comes back as a bylaw for us to adopt, we've got a clear and precise definition for that.
Very good.
Mr. Stavanovich, did you get that?
We will certainly do that.
And then my final question is, has this been out for public consultation at all? Was this on Let's Talk Fort Erie, or have we received any public input?
Mr. Stavanovich?
I'm going to just defer to Jennifer. I don't recall that we
Could you come?
have done any PIC work here, but
Any public consultation with respect to this? Let's Talk Fort Erie, or
No, we didn't do any
anything
public-
sent out? So I'm going to suggest that before we adopt this, which is approve it, which is the recommendation, that we circulate this to the BIAs and put it on Let's Talk Fort Erie, and maybe put something on, well, we can't post a sign, so let's put something in the newspaper, so that the public is aware of what we're doing here. And I think that's advisable. So I'm wondering if if there are others who wish to speak, I'm happy to hear them. Otherwise, I think we should defer this for a month so that we can have some public consultation.
I'm going to put that on hold for a minute. I do have one question.
Yep.
On page 3 of the narrative, not the, or someone, it talks about these above regulations. It's talking about the not Bay Beach parking lots, which includes the Crystal Beach Hill Cottagers lot. It talks about that these above regulations, which talk about allowing overnight parking from, 8 overnight parking. I'm not going to get into the details. But it says the above regulations will be adopted only to parking lots when staff identifies a need in the area or the parking lot has been improved in a BIA area. So if the BIAs improve a parking lot, it doesn't necessarily say, yes, they can have overnight parking. It has to be an and an or.
So the intention of that was to, we have parking lots in the BIA area, so the BIAs wouldn't necessarily be improving the lots, it would be the town, so we would identify that. And then the intention is to figure out whether that lot would support an overnight parking or not. So it wouldn't necessarily be that every parking lot would support an overnight parking. We would probably do some public consultation, consult with the BIAs, things like that, and look at whether or not it was feasible to put overnight parking in that lot. So it wouldn't necessarily translate to every lot that we improve. It would just be sort of on a lot-by-lot basis.
And thinking about that's why I kind of thought that maybe it should be and or as opposed to or, so that both parts have to be in sync, so to speak. Okay, that's all. Any other comments or questions? Councillor?
CAO wants to speak too.
Mr. McQueen?
Thank you through the chair. I guess just to add on to some of the comments that Ms. Pinalange has said, we did have some consultation with some of the local BIAs. So some of the maintenance policy recommendations that have been brought forward were brought forward at the request of the BIAs, and some of it was maintenance issues that have been, if we recall from last summer during the peak season, there were a number of maintenance issues that we said we would bring back a more proactive measure in order to address it. And so we certainly support doing a more comprehensive community outreach and get some engagement back on the maintenance policy, but would just ask if council would be somewhat amenable to us moving forward with some of the maintenance enhancements that we have identified in the policy in some of the key areas where we did get community consultation, particularly around garbage and some maintenance, and there were some requests for parking related to some accessible spots and overnight parking. So we would like to move forward with some of those, just in the spirit of some of the peak season that's happening, but we definitely would put it out, get some additional feedback before we officially adopt that policy.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I am supportive of having it go to Let's Talk Fort Erie for some additional feedback, but I know I most recently did a walk of some of the public parking lots in Ward 5 with the Director of Infrastructure Services, who's already done some work that was at the request of the BIA. So I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can allow this to still move forward with some room for additional consult, but still not hold up some of the work that we're hoping to have done ideally this season.
Council, Mayor Redekop?
Well, maintaining property that we already own, that's operational. That can proceed whether we have a policy or we don't have a policy. This is talking about things that go beyond that, including, whether we're going to be charging in some of these lots, whether we're going to be permitting overnight. That, I think, needs to get out there to the public. And so this is a new policy. But in terms of maintenance, maintaining your parking lot, to me, we don't need to, council doesn't need to say, yeah, go ahead, you need to maintain your parking lot. That's something that's operational, and I think staff can do without it. But before we start deciding where we're going to be charging and when we're going to be changing charges and what we're going to be doing, I think we need to let the public at least know this. And 1 month period of time, I don't think is excessive. So I don't see that encumbering staff from doing some of the things that I know that Councillor Lewis, maybe Councillor McDermott has also been working on, and perhaps Councillor Christensen in terms of our public parking lots. So I think that could be done regardless of whether we defer adopting this policy for a month so we can get some public consultation.
Thank you for that. Mrs. Dubanow, did you want to comment on that? Do you understand that things can move ahead in regards to maintenance?
That sounds great. I think to us, we really want to just get moving on the operational side of these matters. And as noted in the report, there is a lot of this is forward thinking in terms of what the town is looking at completing in terms of a policy. So certainly, the change or delay by 1 month is not going to make any meaningful difference in reality. But as long as council is comfortable with staff proceeding on the operational guidance and kind of framework to carry on our levels of service going forward, then we can most certainly start that immediately.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? I do have one comment in regards to, I thought it was a very good report, very extensive, and like many of our reports, we start here and then we make changes, but I do want to recognize the work that was put into it, and it's nice to see it come forward. That brings us to new business. Oh, all those in favor of the report? No, we're going to defer this, right?
Well, I have to put that on the floor.
Okay.
So I would move that we defer this to the council and committee meeting scheduled for July the 10th.
Any comments or questions in regards?
So that there can be some public consultation.
Okay. All those in favor of the deferral? The deferral carries. So that brings us to new business inquiries. Seeing none, that brings us to the business status report. Seeing none, infrastructure services is now closed, and I turn the chair back.
Thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. That takes us then to corporate and community services. Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Worship. Corporate and Community Services is now in session. We have no presentations and delegations. We do have one report, CAO 12-2023, Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Policy. Do I have a mover? Your Worship. Have any comments or questions? Your Worship.
Yeah, I want to express appreciation to the CAO for putting this together, for consulting the Diversity and Inclusion Coalition, who had a lot of input into this over a 2 or 3 month period of time. I think it's extremely well written, and I think it's a good road for us to be going down. So I support this.
Anyone else? Councillor Christensen.
I'd like to back up his worship on those comments. I'm working in a private capacity on a committee that's looking at equity, diversity, and inclusivity. And I must say that I read this very carefully because the positioning and the clarification of both intent and inclusion is really critical in these documents. I thought this was outstanding. I went and looked for flaws, and I couldn't see any. Congratulations. It's wonderful. And I'll support it.
Mr. McQueen?
Thank you through the chair. I would like to thank council for their support on this, and would like to thank the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusiveness Coalition, led by Riley Zimick, Catherine Rogers. There's a number of coalition members who've had very valuable input into the process, too many to mention, and I'll forget somebody, and several agencies in town that have representation on that committee that were extremely helpful. They've provided a wealth of guidance and advice on the approach the town should be taking with the EDI policy and the implementation. The version that's here was revised and finessed and finally received the endorsement of the EDI Community Coalition. And so it will be the foundation for how we move forward and develop a work plan going forward. The work plan will be brought back in 23. It'll be a multi-year plan. I think some of the interesting comments that we got back is that they really revised the policy to take more of an approach around learning, understanding, and awareness. And we'll certainly be, taking that under advisement working forward. And their goal really, unified goal of fostering an environment of openness and unity to diversity, which I thought was a really nice way to capture sort of the essence of where the policy is going. So the credit goes to the coalition for their guidance and expertise on this in really helping us move forward. And we did have support from Niagara College Capstone Group of students who looked at some best practices on implementation, which you'll see the results of coming out in a work plan that I'll bring back probably sometime in the fall. So I want to thank them as well. And the work plan really will focus on 4 key areas: training and awareness, review of our policies and processes for, systemic barriers that might exist, review of physical environment considerations by the town, and lastly, community engagement promotion sort of rollout. So the work plan will be really around those 4 key themes or elements, and that report will be back sometime this fall. So anyway, thank you, and appreciate the support.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a couple of comments that I think have already mostly been expressed, but I've had the opportunity to sit with the mayor and the CAO on the Diversity and Coalition Committee, and I'm glad to see that it will be a pillar or a part of our strategic plan, but also the increased training for both staff, council, and those that work for the town is very important, as well as the partnership to work with other community groups to increase awareness and in terms of educational opportunities that might be out there. And just one last note, while diversity leads to the presence of differences, equality is the process that ensures a fair system to which the possible outcomes for everyone are equal, and equality does not hurt anyone. This is a post that I made on social media this year, which surprisingly gave a bit of a different response than the year prior, even though the words were identical. And I think that tells us that there is more work that needs to be done, even though we're heading down the right path. And I just want to thank the mayor, the CAO, the coalition, Ms. Pinnell Adjei, who's in the audience, who's worked quite hard on this, and the support of the coalition to get us to this point. This is just the beginning of it, and certainly a document that over time will hopefully be nimble and able to be adopted and flex as we grow too as a community. So, thank you.
Anyone else? All in favor? Carried. Are there any new business inquiries? Your worship?
This afternoon, the CAO mentioned to me that he's been requested to provide from the town a letter of support to some Ontario applications for an Ontario health team. And that's something that I thought should be brought to the attention of council. It was an interesting conversation because there are 2 groups that are applying, and I'm thinking A, that council should be aware of that, and I'm thinking B, that council should be aware of how the CAO is going to approach riding 2 horses at the same time?
Well, I know you've been to the track. So, Mr. McQueen, you want to tackle that?
At the risk of stepping into other duties as assigned, the mayor is correct. The Health Services Coordinator, Alice Preston, and I have been working closely with a number of local physicians. We've met with more than 70% of the family physicians practicing in Fort Erie, and they are one group looking to move forward with an application for the expansion of the family health team, which was put out by the province with a relatively short close, which is this week, I believe, Wednesday. And concurrent to that, we've had another group working regionally on some service enhancements and staffing enhancements for services that they provide region-wide. So although the 2 applications have somewhat of a different focus in terms of the local submission being to provide a local additional family health team, the other is regional in scope, but would have some benefit locally for some of the services in Fort Erie, but would have some benefits more for wraparound care, not specifically for physicians. So 2 very different applications. We've been attempting to facilitate bringing the 2 groups together, which did happen. We've had great discussion, and both groups agree that, working towards a coordinated and collaborative approach for a made-in-Fort Erie solution is of benefit to the community. We weren't able to get them to come together with a comprehensive, coordinated submission together. I think the approach going forward could very well be supporting both the applications, with some caveat that it would be our hope or our direction that from a client service delivery perspective that the 2 applications would be coordinated and collaborate going forward. So what's on the table now is formally a request from both for that letter of support. We think the 2 proposals do complement one another, and both parties haven't expressed an interest to work collaboratively, which would serve the Fort Erie residents well. But as I mentioned, with a different focus on the 2 applications, both in terms of the resources they're requesting and the scope of services, they are somewhat distinct and unique in their own way, but they have both committed to work together going forward if their applications are successful and attempt to coordinate services to best serve residents in Fort Erie. So we're sort of in the middle here, as has been described, to ride 2 horses at the same time. And so I guess just looking for some direction from council on whether that approach would be okay by council. It's certainly a big issue for the town in terms of moving forward, and this may be one part of a much more comprehensive solution for a made-in Fort Erie health services plan once the new hospital opens. So just trying to do as much as we can.
That's very interesting idea, but to me, if it's what part of the region is going to be underserved that would need a family health team aside from Port Colborne and Fort Erie? I'm still talking to you.
So, Councillor McDermott, you're absolutely correct. So Fort Erie right now, we're estimating about 8,000 residents are unrostered with a primary care physician. And so the expansion of a family health team would be a direct relationship to addressing 8,000 unrostered patients. The other application that came through was for non-physician allied health service support for an agency that currently works across Niagara. So it wouldn't be family physicians being added, it would be support staff around existing service provider for additional resources. So it wouldn't directly address it in the same way, but provide more sort of wraparound care for their clients and some additional clients that they could see, including here in Fort Erie. So 2 very different applications.
Thanks, but if I'm putting my money on some horse like that, I would be doing it in the made in Fort Erie horse. We're the ones that's underserved. Your worship.
Yeah, so I know that the CAO is trying to be as discreet as possible. Both of the applications are from organizations that are centered here. One is part of an affiliation that has a broader scope than just Fort Erie. And I think he's trying to be as cautious as possible. The reason I brought this forward was because what you're thinking was what I was thinking, and we had a chat about this. And although it may be that the CAO can provide these letters of support, I think that the CAO's concern was whether he should be doing this without council, A, knowing about it, and B, council at least giving him the approval to go ahead. And there's no guarantee that a letter from the CAO of the town of Fort Erie is going to put either one of these applications over the finish line, and in fact may not at all, because there will be many applications. Anything that helps us in our efforts to find a long-term solution for access to healthcare in Fort Erie is beneficial. There appears to be one that obviously is going to be more beneficial than the other, but I believe that the CAO's intention was to ensure that if he were to provide letters of support, they would indicate that the expectation of the council is that if one of them were successful, they would collaborate with the other to broaden the scope of whatever service they can provide. But I'll let the CAO perhaps speak to that. And my question to the council is, should we pass a resolution to permit him to proceed? So why don't we let the CAO provide some further clarification?
Okay, back to you, Mr. CAO.
Thank you through the chair. So the mayor's correct. I'm attempting to be as discreet as possible, but in terms of providing the letters of support, either of the two submissions in their own right would provide some improvements to access to health services for Fort Erie. And so from that basis, it would be my recommendation that we would support the proposal with a caveat that each agency be asked to collaborate with or coordinate service and care to Fort Erie residents as part of our support. So they're going to have to come back together. I think it achieves, the benefit of supporting both agencies in Fort Erie, as the mayor mentioned, but at the same time, setting some expectation that these are not separate and distinct submissions. We see them as being part of coordinated and comprehensive care for the residents of Fort Erie. And so the province would see our endorsement being about bringing them together to collaborate and not solely approved on their own merit, alone and apart from the other. So each would have a caveat to collaborate with the other submitting agency, would be my suggestion.
Councillor Christensen.
The initiative that the province has provided the opportunity, as I think both His Worship and the CAO have mentioned, there will be a lot of competition. It is my belief and passionate demand of the Ontario Health Team and the province that Fort Erie, the south coast of Niagara and Fort Erie in particular, in justice, must receive the resources. The resources for clarity are for interprofessional teams. That means nurse practitioners, nurses, different for every community, social workers, nutritionists, diabetic workers, potentially access to physio, chiropractic, mental health supports. It is a massive opportunity to provide those kinds of supports that enhance primary health care and the health of residents in any community that is fortunate to have it. We need it. I think providing letters of support within the framework that the CAO has mentioned, that there is, and I would say, by the way, that the requirements or the expectations based on comments by a couple of members of the Community Health Services Committee at their last meeting spoke to the fact that there was a need for, that the imperative would be that there would be a collaborative approach in any of the proposals. So I think demanding it, reinforcing it, I think it in some ways, it's critical that we have a presence in expressing the town's specific interest and beyond interest, requirement that we get compensatory services for the programs that have been successively reduced. So that is my position. I don't think we can lose by drafting. Ideally, they would have come together. I don't think we can lose, and I think it becomes our flag. We want it. That's
Worship?
So then, I think it would be appropriate for us to at least provide the CAO with a resolution that we authorize him to send or provide letters of support to the applicants for a health team in whatever fashion he feels will best advance the interests of the town. So may I put forward that resolution?
Certainly can.
I'm sorry there's no notice. I know I'm a harsh critic of that, and that was the first thing I rolled my eyes when the CAO spoke to me about this.
Do we need a motion to waive the rules first?
I don't think we need to waive the rules. We can. I mean, I could move that. That we waive the rules.
We're covered.
Okay. I'll move that we waive the rules so that we can present a motion to authorize the CAO to provide letters of support.
All in favor?
It's in committee. It's in committee. So,
He's very excited right now.
so then,
Back to you, Your Worship.
why don't I let Councillor Christensen move the resolution? You're the one that has the greatest knowledge of on the council of the health situation, and you're very enthusiastic. I don't want to lose that enthusiasm.
You won't. Believe me. I'd like to make a motion that council authorizes the CAO to provide letters of support to the two teams that are proponents for an interprofessional team that will serve specifically the town of Fort Erie and that may serve other parts of the region as specified within their applications.
Are you good with that, Madam Clerk?
I'll probably have to re-listen to that one, but I'll get.
Okay, that's fine. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for that, Mr. McQueen. Anybody have any new business inquiries? Anything on the business status report? Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. That takes us to scheduling of meetings. Are there any meetings that anyone wishes to announce? Councillor Dubanow and then Councillor Noyes.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The Heritage Committee, and specifically it's the Museum Services Standing Committee at 1 p.m. and the, sorry, I got to look up the acronyms here because I'm still getting used to them. The Museum and Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee at 1:30 will be meeting at on Wednesday, June 14th here at Town Hall, and I believe that's going to be in Conference Room 1.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. There is a meeting on June 14th, which is this Wednesday, the Court of Revision for Frenchman's Creek at 4:45 in Council's Chambers. There's also a meeting, the Accessibility Committee meeting on Tuesday, June 27th at 4 p.m. in Committee Room 1.
What time is that one?
4 p.m.
And the Court of Revision is this Wednesday.
Yeah, 4:45 in Council Chambers.
Okay. Any other meetings, Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Your Worship. On Wednesday night at 6 p.m., we have the Crystal Beach Business Improvement Association meeting. And on Thursday afternoon at 2:15, we have the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coalition Committee meeting, which I will have to express regrets.
That's on the 15th, right? Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Any other meetings? Okay, then over to you, Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, Your Worship. I'd like to move that council and committee adjourn tonight at 8:04 p.m.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.